In the village of St. Bartholomew, nestled among misty hills, there was an ancient cemetery that few dared to visit after sunset. The villagers whispered stories of voices that hissed among the graves and shadows that moved by themselves. It was there that Gregório the gravedigger worked. A man of few words, with a face marked by time and hands calloused from so many burials. Gregory didn't care about legends. To him, the dead were just that, dead. But that night, something happened that he could never ignore. The storm was raging when he noticed a faint light flickering among the tombstones. He picked up his lantern and walked cautiously toward the source of the glow. When he arrived, he found a grave he didn't recognize. It was a black stone headstone covered in symbols that were not part of any other tomb in the cemetery. And, strangest of all, the earth around it was disturbed, as if someone had just dug it. Gregory knelt down and ran his fingers over the inscriptions, trying to decipher them, when he heard a low noise, a groan coming from inside the grave. The gravedigger stepped back, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the biting night wind. Was it an animal, or someone alive buried there? His heart was pounding in his chest, but he took a deep breath and picked up the shovel. With each blow into the soft earth, the feeling that he was doing something forbidden grew stronger. After minutes of frantic digging, he found an old, corroded wooden lid. With effort, he pried it open to reveal an underground passage. A smell of damp and something indefinable emerged, making him swallow hard. As he descended, he saw that the underground chamber was spacious, lit by flickering candles. In the center was a coffin, open. Inside, a woman with pale skin and wide eyes stared into space. Her dress was from another time, her presence ethereal. Gregory felt the instinct to run, but something kept him there. Then she blinked. "Can you see me?" the woman asked, her voice like a breath in the dark. The gravedigger did not answer. He just nodded, trembling. "I was buried alive, many years ago," she whispered, "but I didn't die." Gregory took a step back, cold sweat running down the back of his neck. The cemetery was never the same after that night, and he never told anyone again what he found in that secret tomb. The next few days were shrouded in silence. Gregory, once a man of simple routines, now found himself unable to shake the thought of the woman in the tomb. Who was she? How was she still alive? And most importantly, what did she want from him? The next night, as if something were calling him, he returned to the secret tomb. This time he found the passage open, the coffin lid empty. The smell of damp was stronger, and the candles burned with a strange blue flame. "You're back," the voice whispered behind him. Gregory turned on his heel and saw her standing at the entrance to the chamber. The woman was looking at him with a mixture of surprise and relief. She was now wearing a dark cloak that seemed to blend into the shadows around her. "I need your help," she continued. "There's something in this cemetery, something that shouldn't be here." The gravedigger felt a shiver run down his spine. He knew he should have left, forgotten all about it, but for some reason he stayed. "What is it?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She took a step forward, her eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. "A spirit that never rested, and now wants to take me back to the darkness." Gregory felt a cold weight in the air, as if something invisible was watching them. The woman, whose name he still did not know, approached and took his hand. "He's coming," he whispered. A strong wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the candles. In the darkness, an ominous presence emerged from the shadows. Glowing eyes, a distorted form, an entity that seemed to suck the very light from around it. Gregory didn't think. He pulled the woman back and raised his shovel as his only defense. But the creature didn't advance. It hesitated, as if afraid of something. It was then that the woman raised her hand and murmured words in a forgotten language. The ground shook and the creature let out an agonized scream before being pulled into the void itself. Silence fell over the chamber. The woman sighed, exhausted. "It's done. He won't come back." Gregório looked at her, still panting. What are you?" he asked. She smiled, a sad smile. Just someone who should never have been buried alive. Without further explanation, she walked to the exit and disappeared into the night. Gregory, not knowing what to think, stayed behind, staring at the empty tomb. The next morning, when the sun shone on the cemetery, the black grave was gone. And Gregory, though he never spoke of that night, knew that St. Bartholomew's cemetery would never be the same again. Time passed, but Gregory never forgot the night he faced the entity and watched the woman disappear into the shadows. St. Bartholomew's cemetery seemed quieter since then, as if the earth itself had held its breath. But the gravedigger knew the stillness was an illusion. Something was still lurking. Over the past few nights he had noticed figures among the graves, whispers carried by the wind, and most disturbing of all, the feeling of being watched. One morning, as he walked among the graves on his daily rounds, he found something that chilled him to the bone. The black headstone had returned, but this time his name was engraved on it. Fear gripped him. Who had done this? Or rather, what did it mean? Gregory was not a man to give in to panic, but the sight made him reconsider. However, running away was not an option. He needed answers. That night, with the flickering lamp in his hands, he walked to the tomb. The ground around it was untouched, but as he touched the headstone, the earth began to move of its own accord, as if something beneath was awakening. The same smell of dampness and death filled the air again, and a familiar voice echoed from the depths. "Gregório, you're back." He froze. It was her. The coffin lid emerged from the ground as if pushed from within. The woman with pale skin and dark eyes slowly stepped out, her dress now stained with dirt and shadows. But something about her was different. There was no longer fear on her face, only a deep, almost ancient knowledge. Almost. The spirit was never destroyed, just dormant, and it wants you now. Before Gregory could react, the darkness around him seemed to come alive. Whispers turned to screams. The wind howled among the tombstones. Something was coming back, something worse than before, and this time, Gregory didn't know if he could escape. The last confrontation. Darkness swirled around Gregory, bringing a chill that seemed to cut to the bone. The gravedigger gripped his lamp tightly, but the dim light flickered, threatening to go out. The woman before him was no longer just an apparition from the past. There was something about her, something that carried both wisdom and despair. "You have to decide, Gregory," she said, her voice echoing as if she were speaking from far away. "Either you face the entity, or you become part of it." The gravedigger swallowed hard. His body wanted to run, but his mind knew there was no escape. The earth around him shook, and a grotesque shadow began to form beside the black tombstone. Its eyes glowed like embers in the darkness, and its form twisted, as if it belonged to an endless nightmare. "What should I do?" Gregory asked, his voice almost lost in the howling wind. The woman raised her hands, revealing symbols engraved on her pale skin. "He feeds on fear. If you give in, he will take your soul, but if you resist, he can banish you forever." The shadow advanced, growing in size. Dark tentacles reached out, seeking to touch Gregor. The gravedigger took a deep breath and, in an instinctive gesture, stuck his shovel into the ground, standing up firmly. "I don't belong to you," he declared, his voice filled with a strength he didn't know he possessed. The creature roared, and the wind abruptly ceased. The woman recited words in a forgotten language, and a silvery light appeared around her. Gregory felt a rush of heat as the shadow writhed and began to be sucked back into the earth. With one last scream, the entity was consumed by the void itself. Silence fell over the cemetery. The woman looked at Gregory, her eyes shining with relief. "You broke the cycle," she said. "Now I can rest." Before he could answer, the woman disappeared, turning into mist that soon dissipated with the breeze. Gregory stood there alone before the black tombstone, which was now cracked and without inscriptions. The next morning, when the first rays of sunlight touched the cemetery, the secret tomb was no more. Gregory, however, would never forget. Did you like the story you watched? If you did, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. If you have a story you'd like to share with us, just comment below. We respond to all comments. Thank you very much for following the Reflection of Fear channel, and we'll see you in the next dimension.